fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, sharp and unforgiving, reflecting off the sterile classroom walls. Jasmine Carter stood frozen, her chest tight, eyes flicking toward the principal's office door, where Mrs. Hensley, the history teacher, was waiting. A whispered rumor had reached Jasmine that morning. Another student had been humiliated for a hair violation, but Jasmine didn't expect it would be her. Not her. "Sit still," Mrs. Hensley snapped, grabbing the scissors with a casual authority that cut deeper than steel. The metallic snip of the blades echoed through the room like gunfire. Students averted their eyes. The tension hung heavy. Jasmine's fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack. Every heartbeat was a drum of disbelief. "You need discipline, young lady," the teacher said, her tone sharp as a knife. "This isn't how civilized girls behave." Jasmine's mind raced. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had shown up early, grades in check, medals on her shelf, her dedication unquestioned. The injustice landed in her stomach like a fist. And then the scissors paused, hovering over her curls, a trembling shadow over her identity. A single thought surged through her. "They don't know who I am." Her gaze met the silent hallway mirror. The reflection was defiance waiting to erupt. The first snip fell. Jasmine flinched. The room seemed to fall silent, everyone holding their breath, as the scissors drew a line not just through hair, but across her life. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk and disinfectant, a sterile antiseptic against the chaos Jasmine felt inside. She had sat quietly in the back row, her hands folded over the straps of her backpack, watching the clock tick with excruciating slowness. It was Wednesday, third period, history with Mrs. Hensley, a teacher who carried authority like a weapon, sharp and indiscriminate. Jasmine's curls were neatly pinned back, her uniform pristine. Nothing about her appearance warranted attention. Yet, as soon as Mrs. Hensley's eyes landed on her, something in the air shifted. "You!" Mrs. Hensley snapped, voice slicing to the murmur of students. "Come here." Jasmine froze, heart hammering. She obeyed, stepping toward the teacher's desk, each footfall loud in her own ears. The other students watched, some whispering, some staring wide-eyed, but no one intervened. "I told you, your hair is unacceptable," Mrs. Hensley said, grabbing a pair of scissors from the desk. The cold metal gleamed in the fluorescent light. I don't understand," Jasmine stammered. "I've done nothing." "Sit down. Now!" Mrs. Hensley barked, shoving her into the chair. The scissors opened and closed with an almost clinical precision. The first snip was a shock to the senses, a sharp pop that reverberated through the quiet classroom. Jasmine's fingers clutched the edge of the chair. Panic surged, her thoughts fracturing. "Why me? Why now?" "You need discipline," Mrs. Hensley said, leaning closer, the scent of her perfume mingling with the sharp tang of metal. "This isn't how civilized girls behave." A few students shifted uneasily. One whispered, "Miss Carter, but another shook their head, silencing them. The authority in the room was suffocating. Jasmine's mind raced. She was a national athlete, a champion on the track, disciplined, dedicated. Her trophies at home were testament to her focus, her commitment. Yet here she was, treated as a problem, a symbol to be corrected. Her pride burned like fire in her chest. "Stop," she finally said, voice trembling but loud enough to pierce the tense air. "You're cutting the wrong student." Mrs. Hensley's hand faltered, and for a heartbeat, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then the scissors resumed their work, indifferent. A tear slipped down Jasmine's cheek, but she did not flinch. She met the reflection in the hallway mirror later, the image of defiance staring back at her. The snip was more than hair. It was an incision into her identity, a public claim on her dignity. When the final strand fell, a stunned silence followed. Students exchanged glances, some ashamed, some uncomfortable, some afraid. Jasmine pulled herself from the chair, standing taller than before, every nerve alight with humiliation and fury. Outside the classroom, the hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. Jasmine's backpack felt heavier than usual. Each step down the corridor was a testament to survival, to the realization that injustice could strike anyone, anywhere, at any moment. And yet, Beneath the shock, a plan began to form. She would not be erased. Not today. Not ever. The first snip had fallen. Jasmine clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. The war for her voice and for justice was just beginning. The hallway buzzed with whispers, like an undercurrent of electricity running through the school. Lockers clanged, sneakers squeaked on polished linoleum, and somewhere in the distance, a bell rang, though no one seemed to hear it. Jasmine walked slowly, each step a cautious measure against the scrutiny around her. Eyes followed her, some wide with sympathy, some narrowed in judgment. Every glance felt like a weight pressing against her chest. "Did you see what happened in history?" A voice murmured behind her. Jasmine's stomach twisted. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on the tiles under her feet, the familiar grooves of floor giving her some sense of grounding. Why does everyone feel the need to look? To judge? She imagined her hair, short and uneven, poking her pride like a silent accusation. A few students lingered in clusters, gossiping. She got her hair cut like a punishment. One said, "Crazy." "Wrong student, apparently," another whispered. Jasmine's fist tightened. She wanted to shout, to tell them to shut up, to erase the image of Mrs. Hensley's scissors hovering over her curls. But she didn't. She had learned already that rage in the hallway would only make the whispers louder. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her best friend. "Kayla, Jazz, I saw. I'm so sorry. You okay?" Jasmine thumbed a reply. "I'll survive. Just tired of feeling invisible." Her parents were waiting at the end of the day, expressions taut with worry. The drive home was quiet, punctuated by the occasional sigh or grip of the steering wheel. Her father, Marcus, broke the silence first. "They can't just do that." "Not to you," he said, voice low but controlled. "We'll figure out." Her mother, Latoya, placed a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "I know you're strong, baby. But sometimes being strong means thinking before acting. We can't let them frame this your way." Jasmine nodded silently. She wanted to argue, to demand immediate justice, but the memory of the scissors' metallic click kept her measured. Her mother's caution, her father's restrained anger, both felt like shields she could lean on. By evening, the story had begun to spread online. The school's private social media group buzzed with images of Jasmine's aftermath. Some supportive, others cruel. Comments scrolled. Typical overreaction. She deserved it. Why can't students just follow rules? Jasmine scrolled with trembling fingers, each message a needle to her sense of security. But among the vitriol were voices of support. Old teammates from track sent messages, classmates who understood the sting of unfairness, people reminding her of who she was. Disciplined, talented, unbroken. Her coach, Mr. Simmons, called later. "Jasmine, I saw the posts. I want you to know we've got your back. You don't have to face this alone. Remember, you've faced pressure before. This is no different." The words were a lifeline. Jasmine felt a flicker of hope, the thought that maybe the world could still be fair, or at least that some people could be trusted to stand with her. Still, fear lingered. She imagined stepping back into school the next day, walking past Mrs. Hensley, feeling the glares, the whispered wrong student remarks. The thought made her chest tighten, but beneath it, a quiet determination began to grow. She wasn't going to cower. She would reclaim her story, piece by piece. Dinner that night was filled with strategy and concern. Her parents discussed sending letters, speaking with the principal, documenting every detail. Jasmine listened, internalizing every plan, every caution. "Do we need a lawyer up?" she asked, voice small but firm. Latoya shook her head. "Not yet. Let's see how the school responds first. But don't worry, we're keeping track. Every message, every witness, everything. You're not alone, Jasmine. Never alone." Later in her room, Jasmine stared at the trophies lining her shelf. Gold medals glinted in the lamplight, a testament to hours of sweat, dedication, and silent sacrifice. She touched one, fingertips grazing the gold medal. The memory of Mrs. Hensley's scissors hovered in the back of her mind, a bitter reminder of how fragile respect could be in the face of bias. Her phone buzzed again. This time a video had been sent from a classmate, blurry but unmistakable. The final snip of her hair, frozen in motion. Jasmine flinched, then took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't erase it, but she could choose what came next. I am not just hair, she thought. I am speed, focus, resilience. They can't take that. Sleep came fitfully, each dream haunted by whispers and scissors, yet threaded with flashes of defiance. She dreamed of herself on the track, moving faster than anyone could stop her, leaving injustice behind in a blur. When morning came, Jasmine dressed carefully, smoothing her uneven hair as best she could. Though the scars of humiliation were evident, she looked in the mirror, meeting her own gaze with an unfamiliar resolve. She would not be invisible. She would not be silenced. And when the school day ended, she would decide, strategically, deliberately, how to confront the injustice that had been thrust upon her. The hallways would whisper. The school would watch. But Jasmine Carter was already planning how to turn every whisper into a reckoning. The principal's office smelled faintly of polished wood and anxiety. Jasmine sat beside her parents, knees pressed together, hands clenched in her lap. Across the desk, Principal Whitmore shuffled papers, a neutral expression that felt anything but neutral. Beside him, Mrs. Hensley sat stiffly, lips pressed tight, eyes darting to Jasmine only when she felt compelled. "Thank you for coming," Whitmore began, voice smooth but distant. "We take allegations of this nature seriously." LaToya exchanged a glance with Marcus, a silent signal. Measure them. Watch for the loopholes. Jasmine's stomach coiled. She replayed this moment in her head hundreds of times. But reality felt heavier. Mrs. Hensley cleared her throat. "I was only enforcing school policy," she said. Her tone was clipped, practiced, devoid of empathy. "I acted according to what I observed. Rules exist for a reason." Jasmine's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Rules exist for a reason? For her, maybe. For me, apparently, the rules are invisible until she decides otherwise. "Jasmine," Whitmore said, directing his attention to her, "we understand this was upsetting, but we need to ensure that everyone is treated fairly and policies are consistently applied." "But I wasn't breaking any rules," Jasmine said, voice steady though her heart raced. "You cut my hair because of a mistake, and it feels targeted, like my being black made it easier to assume I was wrong." Mrs. Hensley's lips twitched, a shadow of irritation. "I did not." "Excuse me," Marcus interjected, voice calm but firm. "But don't interrupt. Let her speak." The room shifted slightly. The tension was palpable. Jasmine drew in a breath, steadying herself. "I am a national athlete. I represent my school, my city, my team. I follow the rules. I work hard. And yet, in front of my peers, you humiliated me. Publicly. Mistakenly. And I think the reason it was easy to humiliate me is because of who I am." Whitmore leaned back, eyebrows raised. "Jasmine, we don't." "You do," Jasmine said, sharper now. "I'm not wrong for noticing it. You treated me differently than a white student would have been treated. I need that acknowledged." A long silence followed. Mrs. Hensley looked away, brow furrowed. Whitmore adjusted his tie, eyes flicking between them, searching for the right words. LaToya's hand rested on Jasmine's arm. "This isn't just about a hair incident," she said. "This is about the environment of the school, about patterns of behavior. You cannot dismiss it with excuses and policies. The message this sends to students, especially black students, is clear." Marcus nodded. "And if you continue to dismiss it, you are complicit. That's not just my opinion. It's the truth." Whitmore's voice softened. "We understand the seriousness, but we need documentation, witnesses, and statements. That's standard protocol." Jasmine exhaled slowly. She had anticipated bureaucracy, had expected that the school would attempt to neutralize the human aspect of her experience with process and policy. She had rehearsed responses in the mirror late at night, imagining Whitmore's expression, Mrs. Hensley's defensiveness. Still, hearing it aloud sent a wave of frustration through her. Mrs. Hensley finally spoke. "I understand that Jasmine is upset, but I cannot apologize for enforcing rules I believe necessary. If there's a misunderstanding, it's unfortunate. Jasmine's chest tightened. Her lips pressed together to stop a retort that would have erupted with anger and righteous indignation. Instead, she let the silence hang. The room was thick with unspoken power, the kind of authority that made adults untouchable in the eyes of the institution. LaToya finally said, "We will document everything, and if necessary, we will escalate. This is about ensuring it doesn't happen again, not just to Jasmine, but to any other student." Jasmine felt a flicker of relief. She wasn't powerless. Not entirely. Her parents, her coach, her team, they were her allies. And now, her voice mattered more than ever. Whitmore scribbled something on a pad, eyes downcast. "We'll review all statements and determine next steps. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." The words fell hollow. Jasmine rose, nodding politely, shoulders straight. Every step toward the door was a battle won, but she knew the war was far from over. In the hallway, whispers followed her again, but this time they felt different. Some curious, some admiring, some uncertain. Jasmine could almost feel the tide beginning to shift, slowly but inevitably. That night, in her room, Jasmine lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. The scissors, the whispers, the humiliation, they lingered like shadows. But beneath the sting, determination pulsed. She would reclaim her narrative. She would demand accountability. And she would make sure that no one could erase her voice again. Her phone buzzed with a message from her coach. "Jasmine, keep your head up. You're stronger than this. And when you fight, fight smart." She smiled faintly. Strength wasn't just physical. It was strategy, patience, and resilience. The kind that couldn't be clipped away with a pair of scissors. Tomorrow, she would return to school. But this time, she wasn't just walking through the halls as a student. She was walking as a force, a presence, a young woman unwilling to be diminished. The meeting had ended, but Jasmine's fight was only beginning. The next morning, Jasmine walked into school with a quiet resolve. Her uneven hair was pinned neatly back, but she refused to hide the subtle scars of the haircut. Every step down the hallway felt heavier with scrutiny. Students whispered, some stared, a few shot sympathetic glances. The hall felt smaller, the fluorescent lights harsher, yet Jasmine held her head high. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications, messages, tags. Her story had leaked online. A video clip from the day before, shaky but unmistakable, had gone viral within the school's private social media group. Comments scrolled endlessly. She overreacted. Why is everyone making this about race? Poor teacher, just following rules. Jasmine closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The vitriol stung, but so did the support. Old teammates from track sent words of encouragement, and even some classmates she barely knew reached out. "We've got your back," one text read. "This isn't your fault." Her coach, Mr. Simmons, called her during lunch. "Jazz, I saw the posts. You're handling this better than most adults would. Keep your head. You're a national-level athlete, remember? Discipline isn't just for the track. It's for moments like this, too." Jasmine's lips curved into a faint smile. Discipline? She could wield it like armor. She knew that the teacher, Mrs. Hensley, and the administration would try to weather the storm quietly, hoping the backlash would fade. But Jasmine intended to hold the spotlight on the truth. By afternoon, news of the incident had spread beyond the school. Local sports blogs picked up her story. National athlete humiliated in her own school. Friends messaged screenshots of news updates and social media chatter. Some articles framed it as a minor disciplinary issue. Others highlighted systemic bias. The conflicting narratives made Jasmine's head spin, but she clung to one thought: my story, my truth. Walking into her next class, she noticed the subtle shifts in behavior. Teachers no longer avoided her. Some gave tentative smiles. Students whispered less, though she could sense eyes following her movements. The balance of power was starting to shift, but the undercurrent of tension remained. During history, Mrs. Hensley didn't speak to her directly, though the teacher's eyes flicked toward Jasmine frequently, a mix of wariness and irritation. Jasmine sat quietly, listening to lectures, letting the anger simmer beneath the surface. She knew confrontation now required strategy, patience, and allies. Later, during free period, Jasmine met Kayla in the library. "People are talking," Kayla said, eyes wide. "Some of it nasty, some of it supportive. You okay?" Jasmine leaned back in her chair, scanning the rows of books like she was looking for answers hidden in their pages. "I'm okay. Tired. But not broken. I need to think about next steps. How to make sure this doesn't just fade away." Kayla nodded. "You could go to the news or post yourself. People will listen if you speak." Jasmine considered it. Public attention was a double-edged sword. It could protect her, but also invite scrutiny and criticism. Still, she knew she had leverage, her achievements, her discipline, her platform. She couldn't remain silent forever. By the end of the day, Jasmine returned home to a flurry of messages from friends, her coach, and even distant relatives who had seen the post online. Her parents waited in the living room, expressions of mixture of concern and pride. "They're all talking about it," Marcus said, voice measured. "Some for you, some against. How are you feeling?" "Stronger," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "But I can't just sit back. This isn't about revenge. It's about showing them that what happened was wrong, and that I won't let it be ignored." LaToya put a hand on her shoulder. "Exactly. And we'll make sure your story is documented. Every message, every witness, every moment. You're not alone in this, Jasmine. Not now, not ever." That night, Jasmine sat at her desk, reviewing video clips and messages. She typed carefully into her own social media account, drafting a post that told her truth, calm, measured, but powerful. She didn't want anger to dominate her message. She wanted clarity, justice, and resilience to shine through. As she drafted, she thought of the first snip, the metallic pop of the scissors, the way the room fell silent, the humiliation pressing down like a weight she couldn't shrug off. She didn't flinch now. Instead, she felt a growing sense of purpose. Tomorrow, she would face school again, and this time, she wouldn't just walk to the halls. She would walk with awareness, with the quiet knowledge that the world was watching, not just for her humiliation, but for her response. Her post finished, she hit share, and in the quiet of her room, she allowed herself a moment of pride. The fight was no longer private. It was public. And now, Jasmine Carter, athlete, student, young black woman, was finally being seen. She closed her laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She knew the backlash would come. Some people would try to diminish her story. Others would challenge her motives. But beneath it all, a fire burned. A fire for justice. A fire for recognition. And a fire for a reminder that she would never again be erased, not by scissors, whispers, or silence. Tomorrow, the spotlight would shine, and Jasmine would step into it, ready. The school seemed smaller than usual that morning, the halls heavy with tension. Jasmine's footsteps echoed on the polished floor, each one deliberate. Today, she wasn't just a student walking into class. She was someone prepared to confront injustice. Every whisper, every stare from classmates reminded her of the stakes. History class had started, but the air was electric. Mrs. Hensley stood at the front, textbook in hand, her usual clipped tone sounding sharper than usual. The other students avoided eye contact, sensing the quiet storm about to break. Jasmine sat at her desk, posture rigid, scanning the classroom. She knew every pair of eyes was on her. When the principal knocked softly and entered, a hush fell. "We have arranged a meeting," he said. "Jasmine Carter and Mrs. Hensley, please step into the conference room." Jasmine rose, careful to remain composed. Mrs. Hensley's gaze followed her, calculating, cold. Each step toward the office felt like walking a tightrope. Inside, the conference room smelled of lemon cleaner and authority. Principal Whitmore took a seat at the head of the table. Jasmine faced Mrs. Hensley across from her, hands folded but knuckles white. "You wanted to speak with me," Jasmine began, voice steady, even though inside her chest thundered. "I need to understand why you thought it was acceptable to cut my hair." Mrs. Hensley adjusted her glasses, avoiding Jasmine's gaze. "I was following policy. You were in violation of school rules." "You were following assumptions," Jasmine interrupted. "I had done nothing wrong. You made a choice based on what? My hair? My skin? Your perception of me? Mrs. Hensley's lips pressed into a thin line. It was an error, a misunderstanding. An error that humiliated me in front of every student in this school. Jasmine shot back, eyes flashing. Do you know how that feels? To be singled out because of assumptions about who you are. Whitmore shifted in his chair, clearing his throat. Jasmine, please, let's remain civil. This is civil? Jasmine asked, voice rising. You publicly cut my hair. You weaponize your authority. And now you stand there pretending it's a misunderstanding. Mrs. Hensley's hands twitched at the table, a subtle sign of frustration. I don't see how my intent changes the outcome. Rules are rules. Jasmine leaned forward, voice calm but sharp, every word deliberate. Rules exist to maintain order, not to demean students. You had a choice. You could have asked verified, paused, but instead, you acted first, and the fact that it was me, a black student, tells me everything I need to know about how you view people like me. The room fell silent, the weight of her words lingering. Whitmore's face betrayed discomfort. Mrs. Hensley's jaw tightened. Jasmine's gaze did not waver. I am not just going to accept your version of events, Jasmine continued. I'm documenting this. Witnesses saw what happened. Videos exist. And I will make sure that everyone knows the truth. Not to punish you personally, but to ensure no other student is humiliated this way. Whitmore cleared his throat again. We will review the statements and follow procedure. Jasmine, your concerns are noted. Jasmine's parents, who had joined the meeting, nodded supportively. Marcus said, your statements are noted, but so are the consequences of ignoring them. Patterns like this are never isolated. They reflect larger problems. You must account for them. LaToya added, we are not here to attack, but to seek accountability. And if you fail to recognize the impact of your actions, that accountability will escalate. Mrs. Hensley finally spoke, voice low, a mixture of defensiveness and irritation. I did what I thought was necessary. If it came across differently, I apologize, but my intentions were correct. Jasmine's chest tightened at the words. She didn't flinch. Intentions don't erase the harm you caused. You made a decision based on bias, and now you must face the consequences. That is accountability. A tense silence followed. Every eye in the room felt heavy with judgment, unspoken acknowledgement of the imbalance of power and the audacity of Jasmine's courage. When the meeting ended, Jasmine walked back to class with her parents flanking her. The hall felt different, not lighter, but charged. Students whispered less, some nodding in subtle approval. She felt their eyes, yes, but no longer as accusatory. They were measuring respect, curiosity, and recognition. Later, in the library, Jasmine and Kayla sat together, discussing the meeting. You really confronted her, Kayla said softly. I don't know if I could have done that. Jasmine exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering tension. I had to. If I don't stand up, then no one does. And that's not who I am. Kayla reached over, squeezing her hand. You're brave, and people will see that. By evening, messages of support continued to pour in. Former teammates, classmates, even strangers online applauded her courage. But Jasmine knew the fight wasn't over. The school might try to bury it, deflect it, or diminish it. The system was designed to protect authority, not students. She would need to be patient, strategic, and unyielding. Sitting on her bed that night, Jasmine stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was uneven, scars of the past still visible, but her eyes were sharp. She thought of the first snip, the metallic echo of scissors, the whispers, the humiliation. And now, she was facing the source directly, unflinching. Tomorrow, she would return to school, and the world would begin to see the full measure of her resilience. Not just as a student, not just as an athlete, but as a young woman refusing to be silenced, diminished, or erased. The confrontation had ended, but Jasmine's fight had only gained momentum. The house felt tense, almost like a courtroom, as Jasmine sat at the kitchen table with her parents, laptop open, paper scattered around. The glow from the screen illuminated the determination etched into her features. She wasn't just a student or an athlete anymore. She was a young woman gathering ammunition for a battle that required patience, precision, and persistence. Every message counts, Latoya said, voice calm but firm. Every video, every witness statement, every conversation you've had, document it. We're building a record that can't be ignored. Marcus nodded, leaning over to help organize screenshots and emails. The school wants us to go away quietly. They think we'll get tired. But we're not playing that game. Not this time. Jasmine scrolled to the dozens of videos her classmates had sent her. Shaky clips of Mrs. Hensley's scissors slicing through her hair, the classroom frozen in silence, the subtle expressions of the students around her. Each frame replayed in her mind, the metallic flash of the blades, the tension, the humiliation. Every detail mattered. This one, Jasmine said, pointing at a clip where Mrs. Hensley's eyes flicked at the class before cutting again. See how she looks at everyone else? She's scanning, judging. And then she stops at me. It's deliberate. Latoya frowned. That's exactly what we need. Evidence of bias, intent, pattern. This isn't just about the haircut. It's systemic. Jasmine's phone buzzed again, this time with text from former teammates and coaches offering statements of character. She's disciplined, always fair, always follows the rules. She saved each message, every word another piece of armor for the fight ahead. Hours passed as the family worked meticulously, compiling everything into organized folders. Legal language was drafted, emails prepared. Jasmine's parents explained how to phrase statements carefully, direct, factual, unemotional, leaving no room for distortion. She listened and learned, feeling the weight of each decision. Every word mattered. By late afternoon, the first formal complaint to the school board was ready. Jasmine typed the final sentence, fingers trembling slightly, heart racing. She paused, rereading her words. I demand accountability for the actions of Mrs. Hensley and the administration, and I seek formal recognition that what happened was wrong and unacceptable. Latoya placed a hand on her shoulder. You're ready. Don't let fear convince you otherwise. Jasmine exhaled, a mixture of fear and resolve. She clicked send, and the email left her hands. There was no turning back now. The next few days were a whirlwind. Jasmine met with a guidance counselor to provide a formal statement, answering questions with precision, recounting every detail without embellishment. Each recollection felt like opening an old wound, but it was necessary. Her resolve hardened with each retelling. Meanwhile, social media continued to amplify the story. Articles highlighted her achievements as an athlete, contrasting them with the public humiliation she endured. The narrative began shifting in her favor. Sympathy, respect, and support grew, while criticism from those unwilling to confront bias was drowned out by a chorus of validation. Jasmine's coach visited after practice one afternoon, handing her a binder filled with letters from teammates, alumni, and local community members. These are witnesses to your character, your integrity, your commitment, he said. Combined with the other evidence, it's strong, very strong. She flipped through the pages, reading each note, feeling her confidence grow. Every testimony was a reminder that she wasn't alone, that even when the system tried to protect authority, truth had allies. At school, Mrs. Hensley's behavior subtly shifted. No longer casual or careless, her eyes flicked nervously toward Jasmine when passing in the hallway. The whispers of students carried a new tone, curiosity mixed with cautious respect. Jasmine noticed it, a small but satisfying sign that the tide was beginning to turn. That evening, Jasmine reviewed the digital evidence one more time. Every screenshot, message, video clip, and witness statement was cataloged. She created a timeline of events, noting each snip, each reaction, each microaggression, each bureaucratic excuse. She imagined it presented to the school board, to anyone with authority, the undeniable proof of her experience. Her reflection in the laptop screen stared back at her. Tired eyes, uneven hair, a small scar on her wrist from a clumsy fall during practice. Yet the expression was fierce, unbroken. She could feel the wave of injustice, yes, but also the rising tide of accountability. Marcus joined her quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've done everything you can. The rest we let them face. Jasmine nodded, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. She wasn't naive. The school might resist, deny, or delay. But for the first time, she felt control. She wasn't waiting for justice. She had built it, step by step, piece by piece, until it could no longer be ignored. That night, Jasmine set her phone aside and stared at the ceiling. Each snip of scissors, each whisper, each dismissive glance. All led here. She understood now that resistance wasn't just shouting or confronting. It was preparation, strategy, and unwavering resolve. She rolled over in bed and closed her eyes, imagining the day the school board would face the evidence. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a voice, a record, a testament to what it meant to stand firm against injustice. And no one could erase that. Tomorrow, she would wake, go to school, and know that the pieces were in place. She had the evidence. She had her story. And for the first time, she felt an almost tangible sense of the power of truth. To nod at her, some offering quiet words of support. We're with you. You're brave. You deserve this. Even teachers she hadn't spoken with paused briefly, their expressions betraying acknowledgement and, in some cases, discomfort. Word had spread beyond the school. Local reporters had caught wind of the story, framing it as a clear example of systemic bias in education. Headlines flashed across phones and laptops. National athlete publicly humiliated. School faces backlash. Student stands up against teacher bias. Jasmine's story had gone beyond personal humiliation. It was now a public reckoning. During lunch, she met Kayla in the cafeteria, where students crowded around, watching. You're trending, Kayla whispered. Literally. Everyone's talking about it. Jasmine glanced at her phone, scrolling past news articles and social media threads. Some posts were vitriolic, but the majority supported her, highlighting both her achievements and the injustice she endured. I didn't do this for attention, she said quietly. I did it because it needed to be seen. By mid-afternoon, the principal's office buzzed with activity. Letters had arrived, journalists were calling, and even members of the school board were reviewing the evidence Jasmine had compiled. When Principal Whitmore stepped into the hallway, his expression was strained, his usual authority diminished by the undeniable tide of public scrutiny. In history class, Mrs. Hensley's composure wavered. The teacher's usual clipped tone had softened into a defensive edge. Jasmine could see the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of panic behind her eyes. Every glance in Jasmine's direction carried an unspoken acknowledgement. The world was watching now, and nothing could be hidden. After school, a local news crew arrived at Jasmine's home to interview her. LaToya and Marcus were there, supportive but careful, ensuring that Jasmine felt empowered rather than exposed. Jasmine spoke clearly, her voice steady despite the whirlwind around her. I want people to understand what happened, she said. This wasn't just about hair. It was about assumptions, bias, and the way authority can be abused. I want to ensure no other student has to experience this. The interviewer nodded, impressed by her composure. You're very brave, Jasmine. I'm not brave, Jasmine replied, shaking her head. I'm just unwilling to stay silent. The segment aired that evening, showing the video of the haircut, her statement, and the evidence she had meticulously compiled. Social media erupted, local communities rallied, and messages of support poured in from all over the state. Hashtags promoting awareness of student rights and systemic bias began trending. Within days, the school could no longer ignore the pressure. The administration called an emergency meeting. Parents, board members, and even reporters crowded into the room, demanding accountability. Mrs. Hensley sat at the table, her eyes fixed on Jasmine, whose calm, unwavering gaze reflected the strength and precision of someone who had prepared for this moment. Whitmore cleared his throat. We are reviewing the situation. Measures will be taken to address the incident. But it was Mrs. Hensley who received the most scrutiny. Teachers, students, and board members recounted her actions and patterns of microaggressions. The evidence was irrefutable. Repeated instances of bias, documented complaints, and now public exposure. Even colleagues who had previously ignored the issue spoke out, lending credibility to Jasmine's claims. Outside the meeting, news crews filmed reactions, amplifying the story further. Jasmine realized, for the first time, that the humiliation she had endured could no longer be the only narrative. She had reclaimed it. She had turned it into accountability, forcing those in power to face the consequences of their actions. That night, as she sat in her room, Jasmine reflected on the journey. The first snip, the whispers in the hall, the confrontations, the evidence she had painstakingly compiled. Each step had been exhausting, emotionally draining, but it had led to this moment. Exposure, acknowledgement, and accountability. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Simmons. "You did it, Jasmine. You've made them see." Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. She smiled faintly, feeling a mix of relief and residual anger. The fight was far from over, but the tide had shifted irreversibly. For the first time since the scissors had fallen, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had not only survived the humiliation, she had transformed it into power, into a lesson that authority could not ignore when confronted with truth. The exposure had begun, and Jasmine knew that, no matter what came next, she had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her story. The air in the school boardroom was thick with tension. Cameras lined the walls, reporters scribbled notes, and Jasmine sat with her parents, every fiber of her being alert. Today was a day that years of preparation, hours of documentation, and relentless courage would meet the reckoning she had fought for. Principal Whitmore opened the meeting, voice measured but strained. "We have reviewed all evidence regarding the incident involving Jasmine Carter and Mrs. Hensley. The board recognizes the impact on the student, and we are taking action to ensure accountability and prevent recurrence." Jasmine's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times, what it would feel like to see authority confronted with undeniable truth. But nothing prepared her for the weight of seeing Mrs. Hensley sit across the table, rigid, eyes downcast, no defensive posture remaining. Whitmore continued, "Effective immediately, Mrs. Hensley will be suspended pending further review. The board will conduct sensitivity training for staff and revise protocols regarding student treatment and disciplinary measures." The words hit like thunder. Jasmine's stomach churned, not with victory alone, but with the gravity of it. This was not a simple reprimand. It was a statement. Abuse of power would not go unchecked, bias would be acknowledged, and systemic change, however incremental, would begin. Mrs. Hensley lifted her gaze, meeting Jasmine's eyes for the first time since the incident. The expression was one of forced composure, tinged with shame and frustration. "I regret the way things unfolded," she said quietly. "I see now the impact of my actions." Jasmine's jaw tightened. She wanted to say more, words that would fully articulate the humiliation, the fear, the indignity, but she paused. There was no need. The accountability had already been served, and speaking beyond the truth of her experience could dilute the power of the moment. Outside the boardroom, students and teachers whispered, eyes wide. Some offered congratulations. Others avoided eye contact, a subtle acknowledgement of the shift in power. Jasmine realized the impact of her journey. The story of one student had exposed cracks in the system, forcing a community to confront uncomfortable truths. Later that evening, Jasmine returned home. Her parents embraced her, tight and unwavering, pride and relief mingling in their expressions. "You did it, Jasmine," Latoya whispered. "You held your ground, and you made them accountable." "I didn't just do it for me," Jasmine said softly, her voice steady. "I did it for anyone who might face this, and for the people who think their voices don't matter. They do. They always do." The next few weeks brought subtle but profound changes at school. Teachers approached students differently. Policies were reviewed, and whispers in the hall began to shift from judgment to respect. Mrs. Hensley was reassigned to administrative work, pending professional review, a stark reminder that actions have consequences. Jasmine returned to track practice, her focus sharper than ever. The weight of the battle lingered, the emotional cost, the exhaustion, the night spent reviewing evidence, but it had also strengthened her resolve. Each sprint down the track, each lap around the field, was now a reclamation of her body, her power, and her narrative. During a state-level track meet, Jasmine stood on the starting line, her hair neatly pinned back, medals gleaming from prior achievements, eyes scanning the crowd with the calm determination of someone who had faced far more than competition. She inhaled deeply, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat echo through her chest, a reminder of how far she had come. As the starting gun fired, she surged forward, every muscle coiled with energy and precision. The track blurred beneath her feet. The crowd's roar a distant hum compared to the pounding of her own resolve. She was fast, disciplined, unbreakable, and more importantly, seen. Crossing the finish line first, she felt a familiar rush of victory, but this time it carried deeper meaning. It was a testament not just to her athletic skill, but to her resilience, her courage, and her unwillingness to be silenced. Later, as the medals were handed out and photographers clicked their cameras, Jasmine's phone buzzed. Messages of support from classmates, teammates, and even strangers poured in. She smiled, reading each one, the validation a quiet counterpoint to the trauma she had endured. She realized that justice, while delayed, had arrived, not as vengeance, but as acknowledgement, accountability, and systemic change. That night, Jasmine sat by her window, looking out at the city lights. The first snip of scissors still echoed faintly in her mind, but it no longer defined her. She had transformed humiliation into power, fear into strategy, and invisibility into voice. Her parents joined her, each placing a hand on her shoulders. "You've made a difference, Jasmine," Marcus said. "Not just for you, but for everyone who'll come after." "I know," Jasmine replied softly, gazing at the stars. "And that's what matters." For Jasmine Carter, the lines of justice had been drawn. Mrs. Hensley faced the consequences of her actions. The school confronted its failures, and a young black athlete reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her future. The scars remained, subtle reminders of the battle fought, but they were no longer marks of shame. They were symbols of resilience, courage, and triumph. Jasmine's life would continue, bright and unbroken, propelled forward by the same determination that had carried her through the fight, onto the track, and into the hearts of a community that could no longer ignore her truth. The war for justice had been hard fought, but Jasmine had emerged stronger, wiser, and undeniably seen. And in that visibility, she found her ultimate victory. By the following week, the school had become a different place. Hallways that once hummed with whispers of gossip now carried a mixture of cautious respect and curiosity. Students who had once stared or snickered at Jasmine now gave nods of acknowledgement, their eyes tracing her presence with new understanding. She could feel the subtle shift in power, a ripple caused by the public exposure and the mounting evidence she had presented. Her first class of the day was English, and the room felt charged. Even Mr. Lewis, usually silent and detached, glanced up from his desk and offered a faint smile of encouragement as she walked in. Jasmine took her seat near the window, scanning the room. Some students avoided eye contact. Others, emboldened by her resilience, whispered quietly in her direction, "She did the right thing." It wasn't long before the ripple of change reached Mrs. Hensley. She had returned to campus for administrative meetings, but her aura of authority had shifted. Students and staff alike gave her space, eyes wary of the woman whose actions had been scrutinized publicly. Jasmine noticed the tension in her posture, the quick glance over the shoulder, the tight grip on paperwork, the occasional flush of frustration when a staff member questioned a decision. She didn't feel satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that accountability had teeth. During lunch, Jasmine sat with Kayla and a few other friends. "It's like the school can't ignore us anymore," Kayla said, voice low. "People are actually listening." Jasmine nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her water bottle. "It's not about them listening. It's about them knowing there are consequences. That what happened to me, it's not acceptable. Not to me, not to anyone else." Her phone buzzed. A notification from a local news outlet popped up. "Student action sparks policy review. School board responds to alleged bias incident." Jasmine opened it, reading the article with quiet focus. It highlighted the steps being taken: sensitivity training for teachers, revision of disciplinary policies, and a new reporting system for students to safely document bias. Her name was mentioned prominently, though the article framed her actions as principled and courageous rather than sensational. "You've made waves," Kayla said, peering over her shoulder. "Like real change." Jasmine exhaled. Change isn't instant, but it starts somewhere. And it starts with someone refusing to be invisible. Later that afternoon, Jasmine met with the student council. Members had heard about the incident and asked to speak with her. They were tentative at first, unsure how to navigate the aftermath, but Jasmine shared her experience plainly, without anger, focusing on systemic issues and ways to prevent future harm. One of the council members, a senior named Malik, nodded thoughtfully. "We want to help make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else," he said. "We'll work with the board, teachers, and students to set up forums, discussions, and awareness campaigns." Jasmine smiled faintly, a sense of purpose swelling inside her. That's exactly what needs to happen. Visibility, conversation, education, accountability. By evening, she returned home, physically tired but emotionally lighter. Her parents sat waiting, pride etched into every line of their faces. Latoya leaned over, brushing a loose strand of hair from Jasmine's face. "I think you're starting to see the impact," she said softly. "Not just on yourself, but on the entire school." "I know," Jasmine replied, settling into the couch. "It's more than I imagined, and it's not over yet. But for the first time, I feel like my voice actually matters." Marcus added, "That voice carries power. People will listen now, and they'll remember that someone stood up." Jasmine leaned back, thoughts drifting to the first day of the incident. The scissors, the whispers, the humiliation. Each memory was no longer purely painful. They were markers of journeys she had endured and transformed into agency. She realized that resilience wasn't simply surviving. It was turning adversity into influence, turning trauma into action. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text from a national track organization recognizing her as a role model for young athletes who face discrimination. "Your courage is inspiring. Keep leading, keep running, keep speaking." Jasmine felt a small smile tug at her lips. Recognition was validating, but the real victory was more profound. Her story had become a catalyst for change. That night, Jasmine prepared for bed, reflecting on the past weeks. She thought about the teachers who had finally acknowledged their blind spots, the students who had witnessed her courage and would carry the lesson forward, and the systemic cracks that had been exposed. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a sense of closure. Not complete closure. The scars remained, but a closure of agency. She had faced injustice, documented it, confronted it, and transformed it into change. The world had seen her, and she had refused to be erased. Looking out her window at the city lights, Jasmine whispered to herself, a quiet mantra. Strength isn't just surviving. It's standing, speaking, and making sure no one else stands where you did alone. Her phone buzzed one final time, a text from Kayla. "You changed everything. Don't forget that." Jasmine smiled. "I won't." She closed her eyes, letting the day's events settle, feeling the weight lift slightly. The battle wasn't over. Systemic issues rarely were, but the tide had shifted irrevocably. She had left a mark. She had turned humiliation into voice, fear into strategy, and visibility into power. And in that knowledge, Jasmine Carter finally felt truly unbroken. Spring had begun to touch the campus, sunlight filtering through the windows with a warmth that felt almost symbolic. Jasmine walked through the hallways, her posture relaxed but purposeful. Students passed with nods, murmurs of support, and in some cases, quiet apologies for past indifference. The air carried a new tone, one of accountability, reflection, and slowly rebuilding trust. Mrs. Hensley was no longer teaching regular classes. The board had completed its review, citing a pattern of biased behavior and a failure to follow proper procedures. She had been reassigned to administrative duties with mandatory training and oversight. The suspension, once whispered about, was now public knowledge, and staff and students alike understood that authority carried responsibility, and consequences followed negligence or prejudice. Jasmine didn't feel triumphal in a superficial way. She had learned that justice wasn't a single moment. It was ongoing, fragile, and earned through persistence. Yet, walking past the classroom that had once been the stage of her humiliation, she felt something she hadn't before: clarity. She had turned fear and anger into action, and that action had changed lives, including her own. Track practice later that afternoon felt different. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, and the rhythm of her feet pounding the track mirrored her own steady heartbeat. Her teammates watched her differently now, not just as a star athlete, but as someone who had demonstrated courage and resilience beyond the field. Coach Simmons approached her after a lap, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, Jazz, the way you handled everything, it's inspiring. Not just to me, but to the whole team. People are noticing that strength isn't just physical, it's moral." Jasmine wiped sweat from her brow. "I just refuse to let them define me by fear or humiliation. That's all." "No," he said firmly. "That's courage. And courage has consequences that go beyond the track. You started a ripple that's bigger than you know." That evening, Jasmine returned home to find a letter waiting from the school board. The letter detailed the measures taken: a formal apology from the administration, revisions to the disciplinary policies, mandatory bias awareness workshops for staff, and a new student advisory committee to ensure fairness in enforcement. The language was official, precise, and even bureaucratic, but to Jasmine, it was proof that persistence could affect systemic change. Her parents embraced her in the living room, faces glowing with pride. LaToya said softly, "You've done more than survive, Jasmine. You've reshaped how the school operates. That's not something many people get to do at your age." Marcus added, "And it's not just about this school. Your story is a beacon for anyone who feels powerless, showing them they can stand up, document truth, and demand justice." Jasmine nodded, thinking back to every moment that had brought her here. The first snip of the scissors, the whispers in the hall, the confrontation, the evidence meticulously compiled, the exposure, and finally the reckoning. Every memory was a stitch in the tapestry of resilience she had woven herself. Over the next few weeks, the school implemented new forums for students to discuss bias, report concerns, and collaborate with teachers on fairness in classroom management. Jasmine occasionally attended these meetings, offering insight and guidance, her voice no longer silenced by fear, but amplified by experience. Students who had once avoided her sought her counsel, finding strength in someone who had walked the path before them. One afternoon, Kayla met her at the track, grinning. "You've changed everything," she said. "Not just policies, but the culture. People are actually thinking before they act now." Jasmine laughed softly, warmth in her chest. "It's a start, but change isn't fast. It's persistent, like training, like running. You put one foot in front of the other and keep going no matter what." Her phone buzzed. A local sports magazine had requested an interview, highlighting her dual role as an athlete and advocate. The story framed Jasmine not as a victim but as a force, someone who transformed adversity into empowerment, someone whose voice demanded acknowledgement, someone who inspired others to stand when confronted with injustice. Later that night, Jasmine sat by her window, the city lights twinkling below. Her reflection showed a young woman who had endured humiliation, faced bias, and emerged not only intact but transformed. The uneven hair, once a symbol of shame, now felt like a testament to survival and resilience. Each scar, each memory, was a reminder that strength wasn't in perfection. It was in persistence, courage, and refusing to be erased. She thought of the future: college, competitions, mentorship programs, advocacy work. Her life was not defined by one incident, but by the way she had responded to it. And in that response, she had carved a space not just for herself, but for countless others who might face similar injustice. Jasmine whispered to herself, a mantra that carried her through sleepless nights and anxious mornings. Strength is standing, speaking, and insisting on visibility. Courage is using your voice when the world wants to silence you. As she closed her eyes, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The battle for justice had been arduous, but she had emerged unbroken, stronger, and undeniably seen. The past would always linger in memory, but it no longer dictated her path. Jasmine Carter's story had reached beyond the classroom, beyond the track, beyond the school, and the horizons ahead were vast, bright, and hers to claim. The world was watching now, And Jasmine was ready.